Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining me here today. Appreciate you taking a few moments. If you will, like, share, comment on the post, and then if you'd like to follow along, we will be at the end of chapter 23. We will be looking at verses 19 and 20. And we continue the conversation regarding the death of Sarah and her burial. After they made this negotiation for a burial plot, verse 19 says, "After this, Abraham buried Sarah, his wife, in the cave in the field of Machpelah, east of Mamre, that is, Hebron, in the land of Canaan. The field and the cave that is in it were made over to Abraham as property for a burying place by the Hittites." One of the questions that may come up here, I'm going to take a swing at an answering for you, is why all this focus on the burial? Why is there all this scripture devoted to the death and the burial and the purchase of a grave plot for Sarah? And I think there's several things going on here that God is wanting us to understand. One of them I've already a couple days ago went off on a little rant about, and that is that I believe God is teaching us it's part of life to grieve. It's normal to hurt and to grieve the loss of a loved one. Another thing is it does give us some understanding and insight about how things operated in those days in that culture, which is interesting to me. It may not be to everyone, but I find the traditions and the practices of buying and selling land and those kinds of things to be interesting. And so I think there's a lot of little small things that are taking place here, but the main thing that I think that we learn, and I've already touched on this some, and just to emphasize it again, is that by doing this and by choosing to bury Sarah here, Abraham's making a strong statement. He's making a bold statement of faith in this situation. Again, we've already seen that his neighbors recognized him and honored him as a great prince, a man of God, a prince of God. They said among them. So we see Abraham's testimony, and that he is favored by God, that he has been chosen by God, and he's continuing to live out that testimony. Abraham is teaching again courtesy and being a good neighbor, good citizen, and the way he dealt with this transaction and insisting to pay, and even though it had been offered for free, but he insists on paying for it. He shows that he is a just man, that he is a fair man. But I think more than anything, Abraham is, we've already touched on to some point, is that Abraham is showing his confidence in the promise of God, that he believed God. By God's promised the land of Canaan to Abraham, and Abraham says, okay, well, I'm going to bury my wife here then. It wasn't his. He didn't possess it. But he says, I'm going to trust God, and I'm going to go ahead and bury my wife here. I believe that my descendants, we will ultimately receive this land, and we are to be the permanent residents of this land, no matter what some in that region may say to this day. Abraham believed God, that this was the land that his descendants would possess. Again, it's not his yet, so he's taken a great step of faith by burying his wife in this land. He could have chosen to have went out into the wilderness, out into the desert, and buried her like probably most people did, just like most nomads, which is really what at this point Abraham is. Abraham's a nomad. He's a man with no land. He has no home, and so he could have done that. He could have went back to their homeland. He could have went back to Ur and buried her there, but he chose to believe God. He chose to act on the word, the promise that God made to him, and that is the number one lesson that I think that you and I can walk away with from this story as we come to this will be the kind of the end of the discussion about the death and the burial of Sarah. Is through it all we see that Abraham believed God. Even in a dark time, even again in a time when he's lost his wife, even when he's had it really kind of thrown in his face, reminding him, you don't own anything here. You're just a sojourner. You're just traveling through. But God has promised it to you. And Abraham steps out in faith, acting on what God has promised. I heard a preacher many years ago. I'm not going to say who. I could, but I'm not going to, because in my opinion he's been disgraced and has strayed from the faith. But he did say something that stuck in my head as a definition of faith. He said his grandmother taught him that faith was stepping out where there was nothing, believing that there would be something before your foot hit the ground. That's what Abraham does here. He steps out where there's nothing. He doesn't own any land, but he steps out believing the promise of God. That's the challenge for each one of us every day, is to step out on faith, trusting God that God is going to do what he said. You think about it. Have a great day. We will see you here tomorrow morning.